Up next, we have an engaging panel discussion on what are the challenges that early stage founders face. I'm delighted to introduce our esteemed panelists, Mr. Lovleen Bhatia, co-founder of Edureka, a leading online learning platform. Under his visionary leadership, Edureka has transformed tech education by equipping learners worldwide with industry-relevant skills. Then we have Mr. Shronit Ladhani, founder of LearnTube, an innovative platform leveraging AI to enhance education. His vision is reshaping how learners access and engage with knowledge in the digital space. Mr. Yashwardhan Burad, a co-founder of AccioJob Private Limited, a platform dedicated to upskilling and career transformation. His efforts have played a crucial role in bridging the gap between education and employment. To moderate this insightful discussion, we have Mr. Anand Sudarshan, founder and director of Sylvant Advisors, which provides strategic advisory services in the education sector to institutions, enterprises, and investors. In addition to incubating and investing in startups, Mr. Sudarshan has made notable contributions to Manipal Education, where he served as CEO and managing director, driving key initiatives that elevated its academic offerings. He has also been a board member at NIIT since 2012. Before we start, may I request the audience to type their questions in the chat box. Our panelists will address them at the end of the session. May I now invite Mr. Sudarshan and our esteemed panelists to begin this session.
Thank you, Neha. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, my fellow panelists. It's a pleasure and honor to be here back again at the EdTech Growth Summit. And it's an absolute pleasure to be with all of you. And I look forward to learning some new things today from all of you, as indeed I'm sure the audience is waiting with bated breath as well. So we will dive deep, straight in. Very quickly, 30 seconds on the structure that we all discussed and agreed. I'm going to start off one after the other, asking a basic question, which directly addresses the topic. And then we will take it from there and convert it into an interactive conversation. We will have that for about 25 minutes or so. That will give us sufficient time to allocate about 10 minutes or so at the end for both answering questions and maybe a minute within that to wrap things up. Is that okay? Yeah, good. So the topic that's given today is what are the challenges startup founders face? I'm just going to modify that just a little bit because every founder, early stage founder every founder goes through an early stage. So I'm going to change that a little bit to say what are the challenges that a founder faces during early stage, because these challenges keep changing as you grow and scale the company forward, I suppose, but we essentially mean the same thing. So I'm going to start off with that. To do that, one request I have for all of you is to step back, go back in history and reflect upon your own, early days as founders, and just start answering the question. I'm going to start with you, Lovely. And just going to ask you to just focus on two, when you throw yourself back to your early stages and you started Edureka, what are the top two challenges that as a founder at early stage that you faced and why?
Sure. Thanks, Anand. And thank you, everyone. So Anand, this question, right, which I'm going to answer now is based on my journey as well as based on a lot of experience I gained with fellow founders across, there's not specific to EdTech, right? Based on all the investments I've been making for the last 10 odd years, right, 30 odd people. I think the first one, in my opinion, is figuring out the business model itself, right? While this may sound a little counterintuitive, but if you're building for the first time, right, you need quite some time to figure out the right business model. Many times it takes a few months also to figure out what you're building. In my journey itself, it took us a year and a half to actually figure out what are we doing here, right? And in startups, right, you have to act fast. So sometimes you kind of pick up one thing and just keep going towards it. But I think there is a difference between being fast and being in haste. So that's what I advise a lot of people, that be fast. Jaldi karo, jaldbazi mat karo, if I can use Hindi there. I think that's one, that you need to be patient about figuring out the right business model. Second thing, which is, I mean, I'm sure all of us will agree to, is hiring the right team. Especially initially, getting the first few hires in your company is not easy, right? If you've worked earlier, you have that brand to hire people. When you become a founder, you have nothing, right? When you start. So the first few hires are very key to your success or failure. I mean, you may not fail, but it may put you back by a few years. So these are the two things I believe, right? Be patient about finding the right business model. Don't burn all your resources with one thing. Take your time. And second, hiring the right team.
Right. Just a quick clarification on the second one, and I'll come back to the first one later.
Yeah.
Is when you said you have to figure out hire your right team. Did that start off with we can't use the word hiring, but finding your fellow founders as well? Was that a process, or was that an organic process? You really didn't have to worry about it, and then the hiring of the team was a founding team, if I can call it that, which is a little different from founders.
Right. So in my case, from day one, I had a co-founder. So it was not a challenge for me. But I think with a lot of companies I've invested in, that is also one of the bigger things, right? I mean, a co-founder is like your spouse, right? You end up spending so many years with, and you have to go through all sorts of difficult times. So I think that is very, very important. And I would say there's a lot of luck also there, which plays a role when you get to the right people. I mean, there's no formula to get the right co-founder. So you have to
Right.
be lucky there.
So fortune has a role to play.
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
I mean,
All right. Thanks, Lovely. I'm going to ask the same question to you, Shronit, now. Lovleen said, figuring out the business model, which can sometimes take several months. In his case, took a year and a half. And he talked about, finding the right team, and in some instances, starting with finding the right founder or co-founders, it could be, are the two challenges that top challenges that come to his mind. Now, in your journey, have these two been important? And if you can go beyond these two and then add your two to this list.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with Lovleen. And thanks, Anand, for the question, and NIIT for organizing this. Um, uh, there are a bunch of challenges, right? I think in an entrepreneur's life, I don't even think it stops with early stage. But team definitely being one. For me, it was co-founder, right? So, and I don't know if you remember this, but very early days when we were starting up, Anand, I'd come met you for getting your insights as well. So for me, it was more of, hey, there is a problem. I am itching to solve this problem. I haven't found a co-founder yet. I spent, I think, a good 6 odd months or 9 months looking, and at the same time meeting people like you. And a lot of them said, hey, if you really have a problem that people want a solution for, see if you can solve it regardless. Don't wait. In my journey, what ended up happening is I then just started up without a co-founder. Originally as Career Ninja, and then as we pivoted into LearnTube, going back to what Lovleen said, right? Your co-founder is like, for me, my co-founder is my spouse. So as we pivoted into LearnTube, Gargi was the very skill set that I was looking for at work as well. And it made just sense for us to sort of build that from there on together. But I would say I probably spent a good 9 months trying to figure out how to start. And then because I started without a co-founder, we got some early traction, which attracted the right founding team in, which that then enabled us to sort of solidify, let's say, the team composition in a way, right? So that was one challenge definitely for us. Second, again, being a cliche one, is of course fundraising. In our case, again, I think the first time we had interest in a term sheet, the investor from the US flew in to Bombay to meet me. I thought I really need to impress the investor, so I took him for coffee to a fancy hotel. I think the investor judged me and thought probably this is how I live, and the deal didn't work out for various reasons. And then the second time, I got into a situation where the investors were probably not being very fair in the structuring. So that deal broke off, and the third one just before COVID got stuck because of COVID. So I think we faced a bunch of challenges to get our first round going. Looking back, I think we got lucky because the kind of set of investors we have today, we did not at that point. And the kind of support we got because of that would it definitely not have been the same. But was definitely, I think, in the first year and a half, the most, let's say, painful experiences came because of the fundraise.
Interesting. So, two things you've said. You're saying you had different experiences from finding the right co-founder perspective between Career Ninja and LearnTube. Contextually, there were different problems, different solutions for different problems, and it kind of worked out well. But it was indeed, I'm just now separating out the problem as Lovleen just stated, which is in terms of the team. And I'm just looking at what you said and focusing more on the founder part of it. And second, of course, is getting your first funding. And that's an interesting process. And we'll come back to that. And I want you to just reflect on it. And when I come back to you, talk about what is it that startup founders can, at startup stage founders can be prepared for, or what they ought to be prepared for when they are looking for, based on your experience. Don't take them to a 5-star hotel. Coffee shop is one, but more than that, what else do they need to be prepared for? Yash, I'll come to you now. So there are 4 which you've heard. I'm sure you're noted down. And same question to you. Startup stage as a founder, what are if do you agree with these 4? And what are the 2 that you're going to add to this list?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Anand. Thanks, NIIT, for having me here. Right, absolutely agree with all the 4 mentioned. Right, a few of them fortunate enough that I didn't have to face a few of those problems, like actually getting a co-founder. In my case, it happened organically. It was my batchmate, friend, flatmate for probably 8 years. So it just happened organically that we ended up starting up together, and that level of trust and was established, and that problem got resolved fortunately. But absolutely agree, a very tough problem to have. And a lot of my friends who are now starting up do keep pinging me that can you help me find a co-founder, can you help me find a CTO? I'm like, dude, that's the toughest problem to solve. I can't really help you with that. Right. And absolutely agree with Loveleen's point. And in fact, one of the problems which I was going to, and challenges which I was going to talk about, was pretty similar, I would say. Finding a business model, or I would say rather getting to product market fit, right? Absolutely biggest challenge. And I think when we reflect, when like me and my co-founders reflect, we call it like my idea will change the world syndrome is how entrepreneurs start, right? Like this is the problem and I have a solution, and it is going to transform the world from here. And you just get into building a product, an MVP, it is going to solve it. So you essentially start pitching to the stakeholders rather than learning from the stakeholders and the market first, that what is the shape and form in which the solution is actually going to work out, right? And I think this is a typical journey which every entrepreneur initially goes through, because they start off with so much passion around their own idea, right? And I think for us also, the initial year and a half was equally tricky, where we had an idea where we thought that this will democratize job opportunities for all tier 2, tier 3 college students, and let me push this to all hundreds of colleges in our country. And then when you are on the ground pitching to colleges, placement cells, directors, you realize the challenges there. And it's a tough pill to swallow initially for a first time entrepreneur, I would say. And but the market teaches you at the end of it, and you realize that you really need to make something that they want, not something which you really want to push into the market, right? So I think That's the first challenge which I believe every entrepreneur will go through. And even if you get that advice, it is difficult to absorb it when you are in that time frame and in that period where you feel, no, this is actually solving the problem. Why do you feel where the gap is, right? And I think that is the first challenge which I feel is extremely tricky, and getting to that product market fit is a journey. It's a journey in itself, right? I think that is one. The second challenge I wanted to talk about, and I think we're still early stage, 6-ish years of building AccioJob for us, right? So, and just when I entered the panel, there was Sapnesh talking about how businesses get static, right? And there is no place for businesses which get static in the current ecosystem. And absolutely agreed. And it's a challenge which we faced, right? 2.5, 3 years into the journey of building, thinking we have product market fit, achieving some scale, and then being totally absorbed in the BAU activities, running the business, looking at day-to-day metrics, moving them. I think you have a set piece template and targets you're trying to chase, where you really need to find that that time which you spend with the customers and reflect back to actually understand how the market and the needs of the customer are evolving, right? And especially for us as edtech entrepreneurs during the COVID phase, I think there's been a lot of need change or customer demand change over the last few years, right? And being able to adapt, innovate, preempt, and anticipate, I would say, how the customer's needs are changing. That's a challenge for an entrepreneur, right? And in hindsight, when you actually envisage that what really happened and why the changes I am making are working now, that is the time when you realize that, okay, this is what I should have been looking at, and that should be a focus area of actually spending time to reflect on how the customer is changing, right? I think these would be like two big challenges, but 100% agree. Hiring a team, absolutely difficult. Uh, Extremely, like, the initial team is the team where you want to be absolutely candid and make sure the culture which the founders have started remains and like flows across the company.
Okay. Absolutely. So that's two more: PMF, product market fit, and adapting to rapid changes in the marketplace, especially during crazy times. Fantastic list of 6. I'm going to add two more to that, from my own experience, starting several companies and then investing in 19 companies and supporting several more, either through a conversation or much longer kind of support. How do you handle your first big fail, right? As a founder, early stage, how do you handle your first big fail? Because there will be big fails, for most people. And I'm sure there are a few companies which don't have fail and just keep zipping along, but I would suspect for most companies, there would be a big fail. How do you handle it? And second is, which is I'm just going to take on from what Yash, you mentioned, which is when the market is changing rapidly, any entrepreneur is deeply in love, right? All entrepreneurs are deeply in love with their idea. And that's the confidence, that's the excitement that makes them become entrepreneurs. That's what brings the passion. But when the market changes and gives you indications that you will have to let go of that idea, either completely or substantially change, that's emotionally a very difficult thing to do. And it's something that one has to learn from. I'll just add these two, but I'm going to come back to you, Lovely, and I'm going to start with you again. We've got these things listed. Now let's talk about how does a startup founder handle all of them very quickly. The two that you mentioned, you can take any of the others as well, but let's take a couple of minutes each because we've got 9 minutes left. Quick couple of minutes each if you can take and list down how startup founders ought to address them.
Sure. I think the first thing which you learn as a startup founder over a period of time is to become a little dispassionate, right? I mean, that is a key thing to learn. Handling failures is something which you will have to do, right? And the buck stops at you, right? So you have to take the complete ownership of everything. So you have to get used to it. तो आदत सी है मुझको ऐसे जीने की types, you have to figure out that, right? So that's key. And the other, I mean, again, it stems from the fact which you asked, and Yash also put that, how do we adapt to changes, right? So, I mean, you have to be a little dispassionate, right? The thing which you start with, in all likelihood, that is not what will make you ultimately successful in your business, right? That idea, when you start, right, everything looks easy, right? You kind of build it on a whiteboard, this sab ho jayega, we will build a large business out of it. Doesn't work like that, right? And you get used to it when once you see that, okay, this is not working, everything looks very easy. I mean, since this is the English conversation, otherwise I would have used some I don't know, but yeah, everything looks easy at start, right? But everything is very difficult to build out and then take it to the customer and then take money from them and remain profitable, right? So it is a very hard job, and the earlier you figure that out, the better it is, right? And whenever you take a new step, I mean, the challenges are never going to go away. It's what will happen is that you will get used to it. So that's how I think about it. I mean, on a few of these points, that get used to it, get a little dispassionate, don't derive all your pleasure from your work, right? There has to be something else also which keeps you going, right? Otherwise, you will get into that rabbit hole. So that's how I'll put it.
Thank you. Very quick, but Mr. Narayanmurthy says you have to work for 90 hours, 100 hours a week. But if you don't want to derive all your pleasure from work, how is it going to work?
Everyone has their own way of thinking.
That is a little provocative,
think,
just to see
I
what the
think
reaction would
startup
be. You
founders,
don't have to answer it.
yeah, I mean, startup founders actually work more than that.
That's right.
Yeah,
I was just
I was
going to
just
say
going to
that.
say,
You may
I
I
be
can
just got
relate.
glad. I'm glad you
physically,
said it.
you're physically out of work, but mentally you're always thinking about it, right? So that's a given, right? And if you don't want to put in so much effort, I think there's no need to build a startup, right? That's not the only thing to be successful in life.
Fair enough. Thanks, Lovleen. Shronit, your 2 bits. And in terms of what the founders ought to be doing.
What the founders ought to be doing to solve
Manage
these
these
challenges.
challenges, yeah.
Sure. Yeah, so sort of adding to what Lovleen said, right? You either so one is yes, you got to be a little dispassionate, or in my how I look at it, you just have to start thinking this too shall pass, right? The previous challenge passed, this too shall pass. It obviously is easy to say and doesn't feel like it when you're in the thick of it. But just the past reminders of how you've done that already. And the reminder to yourself, right? Like I literally, at one of the worst times, I was like, so what's the worst that can happen? Right? I started thinking. And I was like, okay, worst that can happen is you'll have to build all of this again. You will build with so much more today that you have than you had before. You have more experience, you have more connections, you have more access and more network and more brand value and so much more than when you did that before. And it is you and your core team who did that, right? Uh, so that's just a way to ground and sort of calm myself at some points of these uncertainties is what's worked. Sometimes I look at it like a game कि next क्या होगा अभी देखते हैं. Right. The other thing is that for us, it as a founder, it was a big conscious switch of going from loving the problem to loving the customer. Right? Because sometimes the problem is not seems to be relevant. Sometimes the solution seems to be relevant. But if you are passionate about the customer, you will continue to sort of just evolve around their needs because certain core needs always remain. Right, it'll just change in form or change in the learning pedagogy or change in the kind of course that's trending today or whatever it is. So that's sort of what if I had to summarize what worked for us did. From a co-founder point of view, I did 3 things. One is I learned the things I didn't know. So I knew how to read code. I didn't know how to write code because it had been years I'd written code. Second, we took a very, very strong bet on no code. so that we have to write less code and we can ship fast, and we get the early traction in, which then attracted, as I said, the right people in. Right. In today's day, I don't even think that's a problem. You go to Lovable or you go to Bolt and you just ship something out in probably an hour. Right. So very big advocate of uh, things like no code or things like Replit. But I think there's no excuse to not building something today to attract either it's your first team or your first investor or whatever it is.
Right. Thank you. Very interesting couple of points that you made, but let me see if I have the time to connect it up in the end. Yash,
Yep.
quickly, your quick advice to
Absolutely.
founders.
I think what you said, like the first big fail which you get, right? I think that is a turning point. That is the place where you either build this mindset that this is going to continuously happen, and this is going to be a marathon where you're going to get a new problem, then you problem solve, ask yourself the hard question, spend more time with the customer, understand the core inside, go build again, then iterate on it, then get the metrics rolling, right? So if you are going to build that mindset that this is going to continuously happen, every new challenge I'm going to run into, I'll have to ask myself the hard questions. I'll have to be honest with myself and what the customer is saying about it, and go and build it through again, right? Like, and it might take multiple attempts to actually get there. I think that is number one, I would say. Number two is like learning to ask for help also, right? I feel I learned it slightly late in my journey, where I could think like, oh, let me just do this, like let me just do this and see, and I like made mistakes, learned from it, etc. But when you truly understand that if you can reach out to people for help and learn from them and learn from their mistakes, and it said like essentially our job now is to build on top of like the shoulders of all the giants we've built before us, and like they've got a ton of learnings and wisdom. And if it can actually help you like navigate a couple of big challenges which could get you in deep soup for 6-8 months and then you fix it, that can solve quite a bit for your journey, right? And I think that's what like either you read books or you talk to more folks, right? Both of those try and like give you that perspective and wisdom so that you're able to connect dots, and maybe the next challenge you're able to preempt, anticipate, and sort of not hit a roadblock there, right? So I think those would be a couple of points which can like help you in that journey. But having said all of this, I am still sure like it's your own journey and you'll run into a ton of those, and you'll have to have that mindset and that grind to figure out those problems and move forward.
Fair enough. I mean, absolutely. It's everybody's own journey, and therefore it's a journey that will have unexpected. It's like driving in Bangalore, man. There will be potholes that will be there when you didn't wear it there the previous day, and you just learn to drive and be successful. I'm going to request Professor Vikas, audience, to send questions. Professor Vikas sent me one, but before I get to that question, I just want to respond on the 2 points that I had made. But in the meanwhile, if people, you have questions, please send them. I'm going to shift over to the questions part of it shortly. And I talked about the first big fail. The thing about the first big fail, it's the precursor to the second big fail. And that's how business is. You go through a series of learnings, and and many times lessons you learn from failures. You should learn lessons from success as well. So you make sure that you repeat. But many times we don't. We learn more lessons from failures. And I think accepting that they will happen and having the steel in your mind to be able to wrap around, and some of the answers to that, starting with Lovleen saying becoming dispassionate. And I guess what he meant is not the passion for the business or the idea of being dispassionate in terms of being accepted. A little bit of a good old Indian philosophy kind of comes in there. You are able to absorb it, and right? You definitely are entitled to the fruit also as an entrepreneur, but certainly recognize that you should be able to have keep a little bit of a distance. The Western way of saying that is build a thick skin. I personally believe you should never build a thick skin. A normal thickness skin is very important, because that will help you maintain the sensitivity that is needed in the marketplace in terms of responding to customers. But acceptance of the pain that comes in because of fear is very critical. And then as a youngster, many of you founders, I'm sure, are very young people, may not be fully apparent, but you go around the block a couple of times, it will become more and more apparent. And like what you said, build on top of the wisdom that others have generated. Well, this is one of the wisdom they will all tell you, that, learn to accept it, and you will suddenly find you're a lot better entrepreneur and a manager as time goes by. The other point I was saying is learning to let go. I think, Shronit, you talked about no code, right? I think the cycle of development of a product is now become, especially tech-based products, has become much, much shorter. And therefore, discovery of failure, discovery of something not working, let me not use the word failure because sometimes people get worried about it, but discovering something is not going to work is now much faster, incredibly fast. Now this is the trick. You are convinced there is a problem and there is a solution, and the pathway to the solution is what you have thought through. And then you are very quickly able to discover, when you're starting to implement through, writing a piece of software, building a product, before your viable product comes, you realize that it's not going to work. Is this a problem of the solution, or it's a problem of the implementation of the solution? This is where you need to be able to get into a recursive thinking and have the confidence to be able to think through. In fact, this is not anything new for entrepreneurs alone. Product managers have to learn this very, very quickly now, because the cyclicity, the velocity of discovery of whether something is working or not is so very quick now. I think that's to be recognized as well. So the one question that's come so far is that how should startups balance between growth and sustainability in their early stages? So growth, I would interpret, I hope I'm doing the right interpretation, is scale, size, sales, and revenues and all of that stuff. Sustainability is making sure you are able to keep the lights on, i.e. profitability. Don't run it entirely out of your money raised in the balance sheet. Make sure your business is profitable. I suppose those are the two interpretation. At least let's take that as the interpretation for our purpose. Request any of you can start responding, very quick response, and then the others can join in. Go ahead.
So if I take that up, I think it depends upon the type of company you're building, right? Not every company will have revenue from day one, right? And but then there are businesses which are revenue first, and if you are a revenue first business, you should definitely focus on the gross margins, right? Then only you will eventually EBITDA positive, right? So if you're running with very low gross margins, then you should rethink whether this is really worth. Right. So I think that's where you need to figure out, right? You should, and then you need to also figure out a low customer acquisition channel, right? For business, right? Unless and until you have that, then eventually you will run out of your money, right? So in the time and the money which you have, I think these are the two things: figuring out a high gross margin and then figuring out a low CAC or a customer acquisition channel are the two things, in my view, which you should definitely keep an eye on, right? And if you can build profitably, then nothing like that.
Okay.
Yeah, I think if I had to add to that, I think sustainability is a necessity. It's just that are you a venture-backed business who first needs to optimize for large scale versus are you a bootstrapped or a lifestyle business? It depends on how much you can push that sustainability window away, right? But because if you are, then if you're a venture-backed business, you need to optimize for large scale at some point, right? Because that's when VCs will see returns and you will attract VC capital. So it's first a question of what business are you building, but sooner or later you will have to solve for margins regardless of what business you're building. So if you can solve for it from the very start, then that's nothing like it.
Right. And you're right. And what Lovleen said, you then address margins in three parts. Margins as gross margins, to make the basic business viable. Then margins as cash margins, EBITDA, and taking it a slightly one step further, cash profits that you generate. And finally, when you are a more mature enterprise, margins from the bottom line, PBT kind of an angle that you need to look at. Totally agree with you, Yash.
Yep, I think absolutely concur with what Lovleen said, right? Like eventually the business has to be self-sustainable, right? So if the unit economics are not making sense at any scale, they are not going to make sense really, right? So, and at any point of time, you should have even if you are burning money or investing for growth, you need to have clarity on a path to profitability, I believe, right? I think those are like given statements now in the fundraising industry and market, especially in the edtech sector. I would say that the focus has come back more on sustainability rather than just growth and just driving growth first. And I think that's a fair ask. And the last 1 year, I think all the edtech businesses and the sector as a whole has been able to sort of reflect and get back and make sure that the foundation and fundamentals are clean enough. Yeah, you are building a business essentially which is in most times negative working capital, right? You're getting money from the customer first and then delivering those services.
Right.
Can you power your growth through your cash flows, right? If the margins and like Lovleen said again, if your CACs are solved for, which was the real problem for the last 4 or 5 years, I believe that the sector was burning aggressively to acquire customers with no real like LTV there, right? And essentially those economics were never going to make sense. So I think that pressure to think about sustainability has come in. I think that's helped a lot of businesses and entrepreneurs actually build their business in a manner which will run longer, which will be able to sort of create a larger impact, even if it might take a few years more or so. But I think those will be more solid businesses to look at. Yeah.
Mm. A very interesting question. The point that you made, Yash, and I'm going to ask you very quickly to respond on that is, what role does competition play if you are in a solution, opportunity solution, link your businesses in a area where there is less competition versus where there is maybe a red ocean in terms of the large size from a market, but there are multiple players. What should a entrepreneur do? What should a founder do, startup founder do? Is it an easy question to be answered? Don't go to red ocean at all and stick only to blue ocean, because strategy has got these nice little boxes. Real life is not.
True. So I think both approaches there, right? Like in the industry which we were there, right? It was a red ocean for 22, 23,
Right.
I think those years, right? And there are too many players with a lot of money, a lot of push to acquire customers also. But then eventually you need to get back to the drawing board that if it's a red ocean market with someone with much, much, much higher amount of capital than what you have, either you move your business to the blue ocean, right? Or you find a way of having much lower CACs, a new GTM approach, and innovation which can actually help you break through that red ocean market, right? And I think those are the two things which can be done, right? I think there's no real third strategy out of it, where if you don't have money and someone else has much more money and everyone's burning, they have the power to burn more money.
That's right. One of the interesting things I have seen talking to all the three of you in my experience, looking at literally tens and if not hundreds of founders and their companies, early stage companies, is that there are many instances of incredible success come from founders in red ocean markets, but who discovered a distinct differentiator, because you don't have to create the market. The market is already there. You don't have to make somebody get used to whatever you're trying to make them understand, there is a problem. Many times they don't understand. And you see a problem as an entrepreneur far earlier than the market actually does. And in which case, if you have a differentiation, which is a stellar, a stunning differentiation, then you are likely to be more successful in the red ocean area as against being in the blue ocean. Let me just go to the second question that's come up. We have 9 minutes more, which is, what are some of the common scaling mistakes that one should avoid? Shronit, you want to start?
Yeah, I think one of them we just discussed, right? when common scaling mistake is you burn too much money, you don't look at sustainability. The other one we ended up doing to an extent was we ended up overhiring. Right. So after we raised our first significant round, we ended up hiring more people than we needed, which also you don't realize very soon because you feel like, oh, itna sara karna hai, such big goals, so many things. Uh, we one should have done lesser things. Right. I think, and I think this is a key difference I've seen between Indian startups versus American startups. They stick to like one thing for forever, and Indian they probably try like seven things and then see what sticks. Um, uh, we definitely tried like seven things at that point, and so we hired people to do all those seven things, which sort of dissipates energy beyond just, of course, burns money and is a waste of resource. Pulls the org in different directions. Brand doesn't form in a particular area. And of course, you don't have unlimited resources. You just had more resources than what you were used to as
Yeah,
compared to
yeah.
before. So that's something we ended up doing from personal experience.
One of my mentors many, many years back, and these were the days when there used to be these things called checks that you needed to give for paying money. You to tell me, remember two things as an entrepreneur. I was very young, just 27 years old, and he said two things. One is hasten slowly. He says you have to understand what that really means. You will understand as an entrepreneur what is hasten slowly. And the second thing is that when you want to issue a check, forget your pen. So you can't issue a check, So that's expense control, in his own inimitable way. I found that to be incredibly valid advice. Not to be taken literally, of course, but in context, incredibly valid advice. But Lovleen, what are the common mistakes that you have seen? You've now seen what 30 plus investments, your own journey, others that you would have seen, lots and lots of them, dozens of them. What do you think? What are the common mistakes? Just take a couple quick ones.
Yeah, I think I'll come back to the same thing, right? When you're scaling, you should be clear about what are you chasing, right? If your if your CAC and gross margins don't work at small scale, they will never work at a large scale. At the gross margins still may, but CAC won't, right? So you have to be very clear about that, right? Then I think one more thing which I've seen very, very commonly is that founders don't want to look at finance at all, right? Right. I mean, if
Very good.
right, no one is actually looking at their MIS, and sometimes I see that investors are also not interested, right? So I've seen a lot of companies which have come to me at a stage where they're kind of going to shut down in a few months, and I tell them, go back, show me your MIS, and can we cut down your expenses by 3x, right? And I'm telling you from my experience, every time you sit on your MIS, there'll be an opportunity to cut down your cost by 10% minimum, right? People think of this as a very boring thing to do, but I think there lies the key. You would have accumulated too many people in the organization. You would have accumulated too many tools, right? Especially the tech founders believe ये भी tool लगा लेते हैं, वो भी लगा लेते हैं, it will increase, and then you figure out no one is using them and the ROI is not there, right? So I think you have to, and your mentor, and you rightly said, right, keep a forget your pen when you're writing a check. These days, it's very simple, right? You just click a button and you subscribe to something, right? And it just you never know how big it has become on your monthly bill, right? And there are times when I've seen people say that we are a tech company and our costs will be very low, but then their gross margins are affected by so many SaaS tools they're using, right? So I think keep an eye on your finances. If not on a bi-weekly basis, definitely on a monthly basis. Go through each and every item. Don't think that this is a 5,000 rupee expense. This is not important. Look at that, and then when you're scaling, make sure that you're scaling the right way. Your lot of people, when they do projections, they say that when we grow big, our acquisition costs, our marketing costs will come down low. That is never going to happen, right? It is going to increase only, right? And one more thing which I wanted to add from the previous discussion was that, to see, whatever is a blue ocean today, if it is worth it, it will become a red ocean because everyone will come in there, right? So you have to be very, very clear. Don't think that today is the opportunity, let me grab everything, right, at the cost of burning down all your resources, right? So you have to be very conscious there. That's how I'll put it.
Yeah, absolutely. And as EdTech for sure, and to some extent, FinTech has shown repeatedly,
Yeah.
the propensity to raise huge amount of money in the balance sheet, and then allow it to get blown up because you have no control in your mind and thinking. And that doesn't mean that in some businesses spending more and waiting for a while to get profitability is incorrect. Amazon has shown that they were loss making for a long time, but they stuck to the model, learned, kept improving, and they actually started making money through AWS first, not through the core business. And finally, you see where they are today. So there is a lot of lessons to be on. Yash, what do you think? Very
Yep.
quickly, or what are the common scaling mistakes?
Sure. So first is like hire slowly and carefully, right? Like make sure the people coming in are a
But how
culture.
do you hire carefully? Because you don't know whether the person is going to fit in or not.
Absolutely. Like I think the first is have a decent enough hiring process where you've
Right.
evaluated every parameter. You've actually got a fit check. If it is someone senior, you've genuinely spent time off work discussions also with them, figured out if they are a cultural fit. Second, once they're in, the first couple of months are a place where the person is actually getting molded into the company's culture and the work and the style, right? That is the place where you should take that time and effort to spend that time with them, right? I think that is one. Because over hiring, and then not really putting the time to train them, mold them is the thing which compounds as a problem with time, I believe. The second, again, which Lovleen said, very, very fair, that look at your metrics, your MIS, backtrack where you want to be, what you want to solve for, measure it every month, keep looking at, like, spend time on it, think about it, right? People, even MISs which are created in companies which are at a decent scale, they're just getting created for the sake of it, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure,
Focus
like,
on that.
yeah, I believe like in our company also like 7 MISs would be created for like different functions, and eventually how much time are we really spending on that and reflecting that what metric moved, why it moved, are we able to reason and figure out what we've done correct to get it right, and can we
Fair
continuously
enough.
improve it? That is second, I would say. And third, again, right, that like when you're scaling, you're in the rush of the growth, right? Like I'm growing 15% a month, right? Are you actually taking the time to double check that is the customer love and the customer
So focus
feedback
on
and
the
response is
continuously focus
equally
on the customer.
strong, right? Because that is
Fair
essentially the
enough.
biggest contributor to your brand being created, right?
At the end of the day.
So, and at scale, it is easy to dismiss it off from your mind, right?
Right.
So,
But
so
I'm
I
glad you talked about process, because many times entrepreneurs, early stage especially, tend to give process the complete go by. And I'm not saying we should become so process oriented that you unwittingly you become bureaucratic. But the fact that you talked about go through the process of hiring right, spend the time, create a process for settling a person. And small example, it's a good importance of process. So we've run out of time. Let me just do a very quick summary. I hope the listeners have had a quick absorption. Very quickly, Lovleen said business model. He talked about PMF and the MVP, that entire process. Recognize, figure that out. May take time, but figure it out and get it right. Get the right team. Shronit talks about finding the right co-founder. It's a challenge that he went through, and then it kind of contextually got sorted out. But it's very clear. The first fundraising, we didn't speak about it much, but you can have a lot of war stories on first fundraise. All of us will have a lot of war stories. I have several of them, but we'll keep it for another day. Yash talked about finding a CTO, and you talked about MVP, and then of course the first big fail, and there's a whole bunch of takeaways that came in terms of how to handle, how to tackle these things. I'm not going to list them all down. I hope people have taken some notes. It's valuable. It's being recorded, I know. Professor Vikas, I hope it gets posted and people have a chance to run through this again. I think there is a lot of takeaways from these three outstanding entrepreneurs. So thank you all very much. Neha, if you're there, take it away. All the very best to everybody.
Thank you,
Awesome.
sir. Thank
Thank
you
you.
all for sharing your valuable thoughts and making this an engaging discussion.